I'm Kim Munson, author of Comic Art and Museums. I'm also the curator of the great show at the Society of Illustrators that's on for the next week called Women in Comics, Looking Forward and Back. I'm joined with some of our wonderful artists today, and I'm thrilled to be talking to them about creativity and process and their art in the show and all that stuff. The link that Lindsay has posted in the chat is to my website, where there's a kind of description of the show with artist bios and photos of the show. There's a whole grid of exhibit photos. I'm going to do a quick intro about sort of what the show's about, and then we'll move on and everybody can talk. We've got Colleen Doran, and we've got Lee Mars, and Ebony Flowers, and Trinidad Escobar, and Emil Ferris, and Alitha Martinez today. All Eisner winners. Everybody, let's see, Colleen and Ebony and Emil all won Eisners in 2020. Lee and Trinidad both contributed or are showing work from Drawing Power, which is an Eisner winning project this year that was really powerful. Alitha won in 2018, and she's got a great new project called It's a Bird, that's a free comic from DC that's about the Central Park birdwatching incident, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. Before we start, I'll just talk really briefly about the show. So most of you are probably familiar with the Society's main gallery. It's 2 floors. Upstairs, we have 90 pieces from the collection of Trina Robbins, starting in about 1911 with Nell Brinkley and going through the Flapper era and Brenda Starr and all of the great like wartime action things that women were doing while the men were out fighting. 50s romance comics and into the underground era in the 70s. Then downstairs we have work by 20 different artists, some of whom are here today. I'm going to go around real quick and let everybody, I've been thinking a lot about this situation we're all in, where we're all kind of isolated at home. I'm in San Francisco. It's been a really slow reopening. We're very careful, and I think we're all going through a lot of like problems getting inspired about projects. So I thought it would be cool if everybody could just go around quickly and talk about something that they do to, get inspired. I'm a writer, so actually I use this. It's a card deck that has like kind of prompts and suggestions to get you thinking kind of outside the box on things, and sometimes that jiggles something loose. Colleen, why don't you start?
I don't really have any problem getting inspired. I have a problem with focus. So the big thing for me is to stay off the internet. If I can just stay off the internet, I'll get my stuff done. The internet is like, a hamster on a wheel situation for me. And once I get started, I can't stop. So the distractions of the internet and the stress, I just got to turn it off. And I'm unlike the other panelists. I don't live in an urban area. I live in a very beautiful, peaceful, rural area. I can go up outside anytime I want, and I can walk for 2 hours and not see a single human being. So I'm not stressed in that way. But for some reason, I feel compelled to pay attention to everything that's going on in the world at once when I'm supposed to be working. So I need to turn that off and just get some exercise. I have a lot of nervous energy, and if I can burn that off early in the morning, and that will help me relax, and then I will just sit down and I'll work all day, and I'll just be happy as if I had good sense. Honestly, it's not hard for me to come up with ideas. It's hard for me to focus.
You said that there were some specific apps that you were using.
Yeah, I use Rescue Time and Freedom. I do have a cognitive disorder, and I have OCD, which is sometimes very severe. So I have to manage that. Sometimes it's not a problem at all, and sometimes it's extremely debilitating. Like for some reason in May, probably the stress of COVID, I just went off the rails. I couldn't even function. So I have to narrow things down and keep things on the level. And if I can push that nervous energy over into my work, I will just happily sit there and draw and not even feel the passage of time. But I can just as easily get stuck on Twitter. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
I
the
use
news-
rescue time and freedom to manage my behaviors, and they have made a huge difference because they tell me exactly what I'm doing, exactly where my time is going, because I have no awareness. I mean, time for me is this weird plastic thing that I'm always trying to navigate and take control of. So freedom blocks websites that I shouldn't be on for specific periods of the day, and rescue time helps me to track my behaviors and keep on top of everything. It's been a real godsend. I use them every single day.
That's awesome. Lee, what about you?
As mentioned before, while we were talking earlier, I too am totally motivated by deadlines. And if I have a deadline, I'll get in there every day and do things. But otherwise, I too am transfixed by every possible diversion imaginable. So I'm very likely to think, well, I'll do that what I'm supposed to be doing in the afternoon or tomorrow, and particularly during the lockdown, when every day is sort of similar to every other day, that can be even more strongly experienced. So I do draw in my sketchbook every day, usually while I'm watching television at night. I've learned from years of otherwise that if I'm slightly distracted, this frees up my imagination. So.
How about you, Ebony?
So I have a 16-month-old and no real daycare option right now. So I don't have like hours like I used to work. I have like little chunks of time here and there. And so I work really small. I work when my paper's getting smaller and smaller, but so I work in like these notebooks. So I can take this around, like say I'm like at the park or I'm hanging out with my son. I take this with me and if like dialogue comes in my head, I'll like write it down. I don't know if this one has drawings in it. And then I also work on index cards and like, I'll, a scene pops in my head and I'll spend like, a few minutes drawing. And then at night, he sleeps through the night now. So at night, when I have more like undisrupted time, I'll kind of put it all together and see if I've created a page I'm working on my second book now, and I'm also doing a short story. Yeah, so I'll see what I did during the day and see if it makes sense for the next page. And then I do like a lot of like little exercises and stuff if I'm really feeling unmotivated, which is like all the time now. And so I did something in the New York Times, I think around Mother's Day, that is an example of like one of the little exercises I do, but I try to make it a game. I try to psych myself out because I'm so exhausted by like 6:30 when I have quiet time to work that I need something to convince me not to have a beer and watch reality TV. So I play these little games, and usually if I can sit down for like 5 minutes and draw something or write something, then I'm okay for at least an hour before I get up and start moving around. But yeah, that's what I do.
Great, thank you. Trinidad?
I to be completely transparent, I have depression, anxiety, and that's really fun during the pandemic, because then I get to see the bottomless pit that this is, this existence. No, but I have to do something fun. I have to psych myself out as well. I'm really good at having a deadline and then crossing it out in my planner and like moving it to another day and being like, that's problem fixed. So I have to psych myself out. Before, I used to be very fear-based and like I need to make something, otherwise I'm irrelevant, otherwise I'm failing my community, or otherwise like the story's gonna escape and it's not going to be told well. I don't know, I used to be very fear-based, and that I realized is not sustainable and not good for your health. So I'm switching that up and trying to have more fun, trying to get back to what it felt like to just doodle when I was in school, when I was in high school, middle school, elementary school. So finding things that are funny, poking fun at this like ridiculousness that's going on right now has really motivated me.
Thanks. Emil, how about you?
Oh, hi, everybody. I'm so embarrassed because you all have incredibly great strategies, and I've like learned from Colleen, like now I need to download those programs, and like I'm Alitha. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Alitha.
Alitha.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead, Emil.
Well, you know, I haven't heard from you yet, but everybody else, Ebony, you came up with like this astonishing thing that you have a 16-month-old, and I just felt so ashamed of myself for all of my super complaining, because I was like, I remember those days, and I don't even know. I mean, I'm just amazed that you're working, and you know, Lee. I mean, of course, you know, you're great at this. You work anyway. Yeah, I draw. Wait. Is there an age thing? Like if I say something, do I have to be a little careful about things I might say?
I think we're probably all adults.
Okay, good. I draw dicks. Like if I am so completely blocked, I will just draw a dick. And it just, dicks are hilarious. I'm sorry to all of, I'm not putting dicks down. Get me, you know, understand me. I like them. It's just that they're hilarious looking, and they almost are comic in themselves. It's almost like they're characters. And if I draw a dick, that breaks the ice for me. And then I can draw anything. So that's my, I have a couple other techniques, but in the quarantine, I haven't been able to do them. And one of them, when I'm really blocked, is that I'll go to a thrift shop, and then I'll look at the objects in the thrift shop, and I'll say, in my story, who owned that? Who owned that? And that will reinvigorate my my engagement with the characters, and it will suggest a story to me about their past that I then become really excited about, and I can go back to working. So I think that's about it. It's dicks and thrift shops, which would be a great name for a short story collection, don't you think?
It would.
Yeah.
Alitha, how about you?
Well, I think of this whole time as COVID costs. And when I'm working now, you know, my life, it runs like a comic book because I have like 5 different jobs. They're all going at once. It's all demanding. It's all these things to do. And my son is in school, trying to deal with the online schooling thing. I'm teaching online schooling, and I'm finding it's taking more and more force for me to start to work. I have to take deadlines almost to the end. I have to eat up as much time as possible off of them, because every day there's something new. Before, there was a lot less distraction throughout the day. Believe it or not, lost less distraction when the world was going on than when we're locked in. That now that I even have my computer alerting to my phone ringing, my watch alerts to my phone ringing, because if I ignore it, it's another death that gets to sneak up on me. It's another thing. I'm sitting in my house, and I'm telling you, I'm living a comic book life. I get a knock on the door and something terrible, and not something I said, this is the line, and I'm not going any further. And you're pushed past that line, and you're pushed past that line. So I think the current state of things is we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea what's coming next. And we just have to stay braced. So I fall back on what I've always fallen back on, is that this is all I do. This is what I do. And if it takes it up to, you've got to draw from 3 in the morning to 6 and get up and keep going with your day, that's what you do. If you got to do it right around the clock, if you've got to take that knee, take it, get up, keep going. Because there's no such thing as stop. I stop, I starve. I stop, my son starves. So I don't have time to internalize or tap into what I feel. It's more like, I need to be forced. I'm going to figure out how to force it, because until this all breaks, that general answer is we just don't know. Don't know what's coming next. So stand strong.
Yeah, that's really, I think the uncertainty of like the present moment is kind of really distracting for everybody. I probably need to do those apps too, because I spend too much time doom scrolling on the internet. So I'm going to share my screen now so that we can see some slides of work from everyone as we're talking. Okay, so just quickly, this photo, this is a detail from Colleen's beautiful drawing from Wonder Woman 750 that was blown up as a mural in the entranceway of the society. And then this is Trina Robbins' collection that stretches like kind of in a horseshoe around. And then the smaller picture is the downstairs gallery where all of these wonderful artists are hung. And this is a list of everybody that's in the show. The people in red are the ones that are with us today. So Emil, I want to start with you. I can't see you. I only have four pictures here. I don't know where everybody went. Oh, here we go. There you are. Okay. So Emil, we've talked quite a lot about the importance of museums and how things inspire you. We've even been on panels about museums together, which I've really enjoyed. I wondered if you could talk a little bit. The Art Institute is like a supporting character in your book, and a lot of the time you use them as a way to like get to secrets and underlying things that are going on with the characters. You even like assign a sense of smell to things, you know, like this basement smells like Matisse. I remember that one. I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about the importance of museums and the way that you see into paintings.
You know, I grew up because my parents were both artists. I grew up in the museum. That's where they met. They met at the Art Institute of Chicago. And so for me, the museum was like a family member. It was like an uncle that you'd go visit, you know. And I think because paintings, I was looking at them from the time I was really little, I felt like I could smell things inside of them. So for instance, when we're looking at the painting in front of us, you know, I would smell the ocean, I would smell water, I would smell, you know, that fishiness. And, you know, I like to talk, well, to describe, I've been asked, why do you draw, or what were, you know, when did you start? And I started really, really young. I think I've said this before, so if it's completely boring and you've already heard it, I'm sorry. I was very, I had scoliosis. And so I didn't walk until I was almost 3 years old. And what I did instead is I drew. I could draw things that I was not able to walk to. And I think if you start drawing really young, you know, for me, the museum was a place where I explored the dimension of things. And 2D was like 3D to me, because I couldn't toddle to something and touch it as a small child. So I think for me, the paintings are, well, they're places, you know, I mean, they're places that exist to me outside of dimension. And I think I look at them and I look at us all looking at our, you know, our little phones, and I think this is not your heritage. Whatever's on here is very small, and it isn't the experience of standing in the presence of something that was created 100 to 500 years ago by somebody who really cared that you looked through this window into a world that they wanted to give you a vision of. And I don't want us to lose our heritage as human beings. So to keep the museum as part of my stories means that I'm allowing that to continue. I'm hopefully inspiring younger people. And I've found out that they have gone and found the paintings that are in the book, which of course makes me very happy because it means they're engaging with this work, which is their birthright. It's theirs. It belongs to them, and they should have every right to it. Nothing should take it from them, you know.
Yeah, people, one of the themes in my book is that of the importance of other artists seeing work by cartoonists. So many artists that I've talked to and read about are totally inspired by seeing other cartoonists in shows, you know.
I am too. I look at other people's work, and I just feel sometimes work always feels like food to me, and I always feel like I'm eating it. You know, and I know when I love work, because when I love somebody's work, I want to go work right away after seeing it. I don't know if anybody else is like that, but that for me is a sign that I love what I'm seeing, you know.
So Emil, one thing, since we're talking at a Society of Illustrators event, I think a lot of people are going to be interested in like process and drawing technique, but I'm always really amazed by the layers of cross-hatching that you use. It has like such energy to it. And I just, how did you get into that style?
Well, for this book, it had to be this way because I was a kid growing up in, you know, Chicago, uptown Chicago. And at the time that I started really drawing when I was in school, you know, well, I was drawing before that, but you know, our family just didn't have a lot. I mean, my father was pretty poor. My mother, you know, she didn't work, and there wasn't much. So I got this notebook and I got these pens you know, which was wonderful. Every year before school began, I got these incredible pens, and it was fantastic. You know, that was like freedom. And this little notebook was fantastic. I can't explain the joy of it. It was freedom. So for me, it's one technique. I mean, it's not the only one I do or can do, but it's probably the closest to my soul, you know, because I think every artist has something that is native to them and that is their go-to, and they would immediately do, you know. For me, it is those big pens, the tactility of moving the heel of my hand, you know, this part across the paper, just everything about the experience. I'm taking a lot of time. I don't want to take too much more, but well, I will say that losing the ability to draw was actually probably really helpful because I never appreciated it more than when I realized I couldn't do it anymore. And so there's an excitement about drawing that maybe was in this book because I was getting it back while I was making the book. And maybe that's in the drawings. I mean, I just wonder, it might be, you know.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of passion there. Ebony, I was reading interviews with you, and you were talking about how you are coming at your book from a more ethnographic research angle, and I'm really interested in how you chose comics to tell like all of these complicated stories. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll talk about that. It's funny, someone else asked me that. I did a talk a few days ago, and someone asked me about that, and I just ended up talking about software because that's where my mind is nowadays. It's kind of mushy. So I started making comics late. I'm 39 now, and I started making them when I was 31, so not very long at all. And I don't consider myself an artist. And I started, I never drew when I was younger. And I was actually into the human body and anthropology. And I said that when I was like 11, when you had to do those little projects where you talk about what you want to be like 20 years down the road, or, you know, 10 years down the road. And I said I wanted to study the human body and anthropology. And I ended up doing that for my undergraduate degree. And there's something, I've always been a quiet person. I'm not necessarily shy, but I don't, if there's a crowd of people, I'm the person who kind of stands in the background observing everyone and noticing how, I don't know, if they're eating, how they might, like what they choose, how they pick it up, like how people stand, their dress, and how interactions go on amongst people, and those kind of like relationships. And so anthropology for me was just like a nice like a way of exploring that and looking at how people from different parts of the world just come to be and come to understand their place in this world. And then with biology, I've always just loved the way bodies move. And then also I've been very curious, like what goes on like at the molecular level with us. And so I think for hot comb, the way it comes through, maybe I take like little pauses sometimes. I'm thinking of the story, the little short. So hot comb's a mix of
I
fiction
feel like
and
the
nonfiction.
ads in between are like an intermission, kind of.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
like, okay, so you have those ads up. So like the ads came from me looking, I collect old magazines like Ebony, Jet, Essence magazines. And I love the ads from them because it's, in one way, I just love how imaginative Black people are. And it just makes me so proud to be Black when I see some of these old hair ads and how inventive they were. For example, there's this one that I love where it's from the 80s, and I think it's for like some kind of Jerry Curl product. And it's this woman and man on the moon, and they're dressed up in like Star Wars outfits.
Wow.
And I love those kind of ads because I see them as a way that Black people find creative ways to insert themselves in places where they've been historically left out. And so I love that aspect of like the hair ads. But one thing that always bothered me was how super like no, I shouldn't say super, but how there was this, some of the ads had like a proximity to whiteness as this kind of way of gauging beauty. And then always the ads were about like trying to get a man kind of thing. And so I just started redrawing them. First I started out copying them, and then I started redrawing them. And then I just went out, like this Kali one, I just went out and just came up with my own hair product line called Pinnacle. I don't actually make hair products, it's just fake. And so, yeah, and I just started creating my own hair ads, hair product ads. And this one's actually inspired by one of my favorite authors, Octavia Butler. Yeah, and her series, her trilogy, Xenogenesis, is one of my favorite reads. I'm actually rereading it right now for like the 6th time.
Yeah, there's that great graphic novel series that's out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Damien
not
Duffy.
for Xenogenesis, but I think it was Kindred, and then maybe I forgot what other one he did. But anyway, yeah, so I guess that's kind of anthropological, like looking at the hair product ads. Yeah, it's a bit archival. I was doing like my archival research. It really wasn't. It was just me like obsessing over these old magazines and just looking at the hair ads. I mean, I haven't done it recently because, you know, I have a toddler now, but when I have some more downtime, and when stores open up, that's where I'll be, is looking for old magazines again.
Wow. Well, that's really cool. That's such a great process for showing your research. I'd like to talk about Drawing Power a little bit. This is this amazing project. Both Trinidad and Lee contributed to this. I think Emil has a piece in this. You've got the piece at the end of the book. So Trinidad, I was reading an interview with you. You said that making art, even if it's shitty or unrefined, is magic. You said that creating projects when you were young seemed like a natural route to you when you got into college. What comics did you read as a kid that inspired you?
Like a lot of people, I like Calvin and Hobbes, pretty much anything in the Sunday newspaper. My dad used to save me the Sundays, Sunday funnies every week and leave them by my bed. And then I would take out my favorites and tape them on the wall. And so I had a wall just filled with like stapled comics for many, many years. I went off to college, came back, and they were gone. And I don't know what happened to them.
No.
My parents cleaned up. Anyway, I had a big collection on my wall. But I also, as I got like a little bit older and I found underground and alternative comics, I got into things that expressed violence. So Johnny the Homicidal Maniac by Jonan Vasquez was a big one for me that I read every day after school. And I think seeing, you know, how he depicted violence in a funny way, which I thought was, you know, very like, you know, 80s movies. We can watch these horror movies that are very like visceral and graphic, but somehow they like insert a joke in it and suddenly the violence is tolerable. I thought it was fascinating to see, or sometimes tolerable. And I thought it was fascinating to see how violence can be handled. And so I kind of paid attention to that over the years and figured out what I liked, what I thought was appropriate or challenging or enlightening, and then what I didn't like, things that are exploitative and that disregard human connection and experience in art. So I don't know, I don't have any general rules about like how to necessarily depict each, you know, violent act, but I do understand how folks can react to it and how it can be read, or I'm kind of going off track, but
Yeah, well, so you actually shared your, when you shared your pieces with us, you actually showed us your whole process from blue pencil all the way through roughs to the finished colored version. I wondered, we talked a little bit about how you worked in laying out the piece to like find kind of a rhythm to the violence to make people stay connected to it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. When I was making this, I actually hadn't acknowledged to myself that this incident was rape. So when I was asked to make a story, I thought about other things that my friends would possibly contribute, which they did, stories about harassment and microaggressions and things that they experience in relationships. And it kind of popped up for me to write about something that I don't think about and I don't talk about. And it's not something I was consciously just burying. It was something that I was taught to look at in like writing training. Whatever you're trying to write about that, write about the chair in the room, not everything else in the room, not all the other furniture. So I thought, how can we make sure that people will look and possibly not look away? How can we keep them there and sit with it, not to traumatize, not to re-traumatize, but to open some kind of perspective. To be able to sit with something and follow through is also taught in therapy. For a lot of people who experience PTSD, they might go through exposure therapy, and that can include reading literature that discusses or touches upon this type of violence, and to read it all the way through, to not stop when the fear arises necessarily. And this isn't everyone, but that was my approach. And so I thought of doing a poem, a comic poem, or a poem comic. And I thought that would be a way to get people to sit with each line, because the lines aren't explicit. The lines require some sitting with the language to let it sink in. And that then is paired with some imagery that's a little more difficult. And I felt like if I were to read something like this, if I had gone through something like this and came across artwork that understood how difficult this is to look at, that I would be able to finish it, and I would then be able to connect with it without being harmed by it. So that was my goal, and that was the way that I approached writing, being scarce or economic with like the language, and the pacing is kind of handled by treating each panel as a line. So taking line by line the way that you would carefully with a poem, rather than like a prose story.
I think that this whole drawing power project, with all of these stories about things that women have dealt with, and harassment and rape and everything else, is probably really powerful for women to read and deal with their feelings about things. I want to move on to Lee, who also has a piece in drawing power. Lee has had an incredible career. You were one of the founding mothers of women's comics back in the 70s. In college, you assisted the syndicated cartoonist Tex Blaisdell, did I say that right?
Yes.
On titles like High and Lois, Little Orphan Andy, and Prince Valiant. Then you got interested in editorial cartoons, and you connected with her block. Can you talk a little bit about that situation?
Well, I always wanted to be an editorial cartoonist, and throughout my school career, I was always the cartoonist for the school newspaper. And when I was in college in Washington, D.C., at American University, Herb Block, who was the Washington Post cartoonist, liberal cartoonist, who won 3 Pulitzer Awards and a 4th Pulitzer Award that he shared with a writer about Watergate. So he came to talk to a class. And the editor of the school newspaper brought along my work. And this was when I was a sophomore. And so he looked at the work and said, this guy's pretty good. Once he graduates, have him come and see me.
Oh my gosh.
This was only the beginning of the advantages of having an ambisexual name. So a couple of years later, I did go to see Herb Block. And when I showed up in the office, he said, "You're a girl?" We moved on from that. He offered me lunch, which was wonderful. He looked over my stuff and he said, well, normally I would say, go back to your hometown and start working for your local newspaper, and begin doing cartoons, and let them see your cartoons, and then eventually they may hire you. And I said, my hometown is Montgomery, Alabama. And he said immediately, don't go back to your hometown. You might be lynched. So he explained that there were absolutely no women editorial cartoonists in the United States. If I wanted to move to Europe, I might have a career, but certainly not within the United States. But he said that he would give me a letter of recommendation, a reference letter, and also gave me or his secretary gave me the addresses of the papers where he was syndicated on the East Coast. And so, and he chose which cartoons he thought I should include. So I did all that and waited for a couple of months. I heard back from maybe 4 or 5. They were saying, we're so happy we heard from you. These are very nice, blah, blah, blah. But nobody wanted to hire me. This was before the term sexism or before anything about that. So it was wonderful that he was so supportive, but it didn't go anywhere. But
still, you've got a great story.
Yes.
I want to move on to talking about your pieces in Drawing Power now. The few people that I got to talk with before the gallery closed in New York were just fascinated with your piece and were really struck by the way that you talk about the aftermath of things. When I was reading interviews with you and I found out that you worked in animation for a while, I can really see how, you know, it seems, I can see it in this piece particularly, like in the assault itself. It just seems like it's from an animated film, like the way that your focus is drawn and lettering and everything. Can you talk a little bit about your process of like how to express like all of these emotions in the end, like in the shower scene and the guilt and everything?
I began by doing sketches of whatever comes to mind immediately. And then the dialogue comes simultaneously, bits of dialogue or just random things. The shower scene was one of the first things that occurred to me. And also, concentrating, I thought, on the results of this attack were really important as well. It's kind of like in my head, there's a camera, and I move the camera around to see from what viewpoint would this be strongest. And sometimes I do sketches, kind of like thumbnail sketches, to work things out as well. And then when I come up with the angle of the shot, that's the one I use. I was working at animation simultaneously with the comic book work. I became an animation director, but during the first years of this, how I supported my comic book creation addiction was through animation. And
okay.
The idea of using shades of one color is again a use of color as a as a shock element in this story in particular. But I can use spot color to emphasize the various details as I have on other stories.
I think the limited color palette is really effective. I want to move on to Colleen now. So Colleen, I'm sure there are lots of Neil Gaiman fans in the audience. Talk a little bit about, I know you guys collaborated before on Sandman and on Trollbridge. Could you talk about how Snow Glass Apples came together?
Well, we've worked together a number of times, and Trollbridge did well, and they suggested that I do Snow Glass Apples, and I jumped at it. Of course, who wouldn't want to do that? Now, Neil and I have been enthusiasts of the Irish historian Harry Clarke for a long time. I've enjoyed Harry Clarke's work since I was a kid. First, I mistook it for Aubrey Beardsley. Did not realize he was Irish, but work resembles Aubrey Beardsley, but his career is much more expansive. He did a great deal more illustration, and he also worked as a craftsman in stained glass. And Neil loves the stuff, and I've wanted to do a work in that ornamental decorative style a long time, and I thought Snow Glass Apples would be perfect for that. So I've spent some months burying myself in the golden age of illustration idioms and Harry Clarke's work. I traveled to Dublin to get a look at the originals, because when you look at Clarke's watercolors as printed in books, you're generally looking at old faded copies, and you get a chance to look at the originals. They're really quite brilliant. And of course, nothing conveys the power of the stained glass like actually getting to look at the stained glass. I took this photograph in Dublin at the National Gallery, and he came up with, you see this purplish blue, they call that Harry Clarke blue because of the particular way that he fired the glass and got that brilliant, brilliant blue into the glass. And of course, you don't see that very much in the illustration that I've done over here, but later in the book, I use portions of this piece as inspiration for a character in the book. This is from the Song of Mad Prince. It's an illustration from Walter Delamere poem, and I incorporated some elements directly from Clarke's work into this book. Of course, I redrew them and yada, yada, but I actually sampled some of his color work. I went through, I got the photographs that I took in Dublin, and I used them like a palette while I was coloring the comic. Instead of having a particular palette, I would have a picture of his window, and I would get that color, that color, that color, and I would use that when I was coloring the pages. It's a little tricky. It's a little more tedious than the normal way of coloring comics, but I think it's prettier. It's pretty, and it gives the book a look that I'm not seeing anywhere else. So that made me really happy. I think we were able to accomplish some interesting.
It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the colors are really rich. The metallic tones are gorgeous. A lot of people comment that they just love the Wonder Woman when they come in at the entrance there. Could you talk a little bit about Wonder Woman and what that character might mean to you?
Oh man, I love Wonder Woman. I've loved Wonder Woman since I was a little girl, and watching it on Super Friends on the TV, and getting to work on Wonder Woman as an adult is just freakishly cool. And I worked on Wonder Woman off and on since the 1980s. I've done little projects here and there, and for some reason DC is hiring me more often. I don't know why, but thanks. So getting to draw Wonder Woman and making her this positive, happy, inspiring character is what I like bringing to the characters. So many superheroes these days are very dark and intense and harsh, and I always liked Wonder Woman as being this positive, wonderful character that I'm drawn to as somebody I would like to know and somebody I would like to be like, and Themyscira as being this real paradise island of
right. The Dark Wonder Woman definitely seems like the wrong direction.
Yeah, I'm totally not into that. And you know, that's okay if that's what people want, but whenever I work on Wonder Woman, it's not that Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
I'm doing a much cheerier Wonder Woman. I'm doing a Wonder Woman I think is the kind of Wonder Woman that I would like to have seen as a young girl. That's what I'm
Great.
doing.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to Alitha now, who's also got a superhero thing going on. So Alitha, I read that you're actually the first woman of color to work on flagship titles for both Marvel and DC. How did you get your big break at Marvel?
I was Joe Quesada's ghost coming in for Osriel Ash and showing my work around, and Bobby Chase gave me Iron Man. This is after working on Black Panther and other books from with Mark Texeira, working on Daredevil also as a ghost with Marvel Knights when they relaunched the title. So I've been underneath the seams for like 21 years. This is all I've ever done. And to me, you're only as recognized or as good as your last work. And what you're showing is 2 works ago. I don't have my own voice within comics yet. My own stuff is different. So I just kind of regurgitate what I'm told. And it's always very interesting to me to, you know, that I've been able to evolve all these years and to have the staying power. But I think that comes from a commercial angle, less of a creative one for myself.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I do want to talk about, since we're talking to a New York audience, I really wanted to be sure that they all saw this piece. This is 3 pieces from Alitha's project 2 projects ago. I didn't know. It's a free comic from DC that kind of loosely based on what happened in Central Park. Christian Cooper was the writer on this project. He said, the most important part for me is the last 2 pages because of what they focus on. The person is chattering away, the Karen in this, trying to make it all about her, and our character turns his back to her and her voice gets smaller and smaller because she's insignificant. And what matters is what we've lost and to keep from losing more. And that's what he turns his attention to in that last page. I think that's the most important message of the whole thing. Could you talk about how you express this visually, how you designed it?
Well, I followed the script. Had the script, and it wasn't like a full script, so it wasn't describing every little thing that happened. So we get to walk through this beautiful park, this setting. I use my son as a model, mostly because he's a little cranky teenager going through many, many different emotions. So I get to draw those wonderful expressions that I get to see every day, but under different circumstances. But doing this, I realized I had to take a different approach than when I draw superhero stuff, because superhero stuff is fantasy. This is reality. This is wanting me to draw something like scenes of death that we did not get to see. And very interesting, I did not see George's passing when I knew it was coming when I first turned it on and it was making that sensational headlines. I'm like, no. But having to draw this story forced me to look at that and take it and extrapolate from it as a point of reference. And I find it very, that comics would require me to do something that in and of myself and for my life I would not have done. For myself as a person, I thought that was too far for me. But for comics, because I draw above the board, I don't add myself to it. I have to literally come outside of myself and my tolerance level to be able to get something done. So I'm of 2 different minds and 2 different worlds when I draw. It's like it's not personal to me in that sense. Mm-hmm. It's not my story. And then I'm always braced because as much I got to work with such a wonderful team, everything from Mark Morales, who inked me, to Emilio Lopez, to the letterer who did such a fantastic job. His name escapes me right now, but we all came together on this project, and and DC was happy to do it. Everybody was excited. We were worried. Everything was, and the one thing you could not anticipate was the backlash. Quietly, I get messages from people of color within the community. Why did they hire a woman to do it?
What? Really?
Why did they hire you to do it? She's not Black enough. I'm Hispanic. I hear
wow.
things that why I don't have a huge online presence is because I have to stay quiet, because I'm used to being attacked for who I am and what I am, even to this day. So people look at me and they will ask me a question that always sticks in my craw. How's it feel to be a Black woman in the industry? And I'm going, you're talking about the color of my skin, or you're assuming my heritage just because? Or where did you get the last name Martinez? What's my family name? And to be trying to extract from the work, trying to look for me in it, it's like you realize that this is a job. This is a job I happen to do well. This is a job I'm proud to do. But I do not want to be remembered for being a person of color, for being a woman of color doing this. I do not want to be remembered for that. I am an artist. I fought hard for this. I'm still fighting for this. I'm still climbing for this. Just every single time it comes up, and then to be attacked underneath the scene of it, to have people confessing to me after doing interviews about this particular project, which is like 2 ago, confessing crimes they've committed against people of color, hitting my SVA email. I was shocked. It was horrifying. And it makes me have to, pull back a little further. And I'm going, okay, this is interesting. So whenever, this is not my first big rodeo with a big project. I've been on many big projects, and I have a story for almost every big project, because it comes with a price. And I pay it every single time. And you say, well, why in the world do you do this? Because I gotta stand until somebody takes my place. You understand, you're doing work in a 1% club for the big 2. And if you don't stand, who will take my place? I have no choice.
I'm really sorry that you're still going through that. It's unforgivable. I admire all of you for standing up and doing your thing and expressing yourselves. And Lee, you've been doing this the longest, and women's comics was such a great breakthrough. We're going to take some questions now. I have some questions from the audience. I have a question about the difference between the attendee says, since most comic art is designed for reproduction and the object is the printed story, can anyone say if they had second thoughts about having comic art hung in museums isolated from its larger work? Now, in my book, I write a lot about narrative in comics and about how the eye focuses on different things when it's actually on the wall. But I wonder, if any of you have any comments about how differently you see your work when it's hung up like this.
I draw everything with the intention of it being an individual unit work of art. Every time I sit down and draw a page, I go out of my way to make sure I use archival materials. I'm always thinking about, where's this going to be hanging in 100 years? I know that's not, I've actually had people say, that sounds pretentious. And I'm like, my work's in my museums, complain about it later. I always think about it. I always do. I've been thinking about it for decades now, and I completely changed my process early on, because when I first got started, everybody was using Dr. Martin's concentrated watercolors, which is extremely fugitive. I'd go into an artist's house and see some faded thing on the wall, and I'm like, oh, that's, that looks really strange. He's like, well, it looked great when I painted it, and it's 3 years old. I was like, that's not happening to my work. I said, that's not happening to my work. I want to be going into a museum and seeing my work next to Rose O'Neill and J.C. Leyendecker and all of these people. That's what I want. And I want an individual page of my comic art to be that good, and I want it there. That's what I draw them for.
Well, it's there. Trina's collection is awesome. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you guys can't actually see. I don't have any of you actually seen the show? I mean, it was closed for so long.
No.
Yeah, so you're there. We don't have Leyendecker, but all the famous women cartoonists in Trina's collection are there. So Lee, it looked like you were going to say something. Lee, were you going to say something?
What I love about having comic work in museums is, although the printed work goes all over, and there's a chance for people to see it there, people have, even now, prejudices. So if the work is hanging in museums or hanging as exhibits, they suddenly recognize the value of it. It's ironic and terrible, but that's the way it is. So there were, I guess, about 3 overall women in comics exhibits that went to first to England, then to Germany, then to Italy, and ended up in France. And all 3 of these were great in that we got feedback, because we all had websites by this point. We got feedback and people asking questions. It sort of revitalized a lot of people's work. So I'm all for it.
Anybody else have a comment on this issue? Ebony?
Yeah, I was gonna say quickly, I think I'm the opposite of Colleen. Now you're making me second guess everything I do. But so I'm new to all of this, and so I was very flattered when I got the email saying that you wanted me to pick some pieces out to hang on a wall. And I was wondering a little bit about like pulling pages out from out of the context of the stories, and so that did influence like what I decided to select, and that's why I chose the hair ads, because I think those are more standalone and people would get a sense of like what the book entails. Maybe not. And then I did a little 2-page comic I did for the New Yorker, because it's a standalone piece that has a beginning and end. And so for me, I was most concerned about like people kind of understanding some aspect of the story I was trying to tell and getting a sense of like completeness with it. So yeah, it did impact what I decided to do. And now I'm going to choose more archival things when I do my.
As a curator, I really, this idea of narrative was really forward in my mind when I was picking things. I actually, when I saw the size of the gallery and everything, I thought that I needed to show at least 4 pages from everybody so that there could be like a chance for a short narrative of some sort, or at least enough work so that people would have more of an idea, because I didn't want to do like a survey where it was like 1 piece from 40 people. It just wasn't enough for me. Anybody else want to talk on this topic? No? Okay. I got a comment here. How can I support Alitha? I keep falling over your name. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Alitha. It says, rude people don't have to be the loudest.
Well, we'll see when you buy a Marvel and DC book. I get that's them, but for myself, it's www.arietstorm.com, because I want to be a sci-fi writer. I hear my name is sorry and too ethnic for publication.
Wow.
I know, right? But I want to write sci-fi. I love military action drama. What I draw for comics is like, I love heroes. Don't get me wrong, but if I could draw a giant robot, that's where I want to be. I want to draw things that are bombastic and huge and just, things that, people that fight with all that big energy. And I'm finding more and more, I'm starting to walk away from that, because comics are requiring you to be more quiet, and they're starting to be more reflective, and they're starting to do a lot more telling than showing. So they will, instead of having the battle, you have a cliffhanger and we have a beautiful battle, next thing, no, the book will open and it'll be a week later after the battle. I want to draw the battle. I want to draw the hero laying on the ground. I want to sort of, oh God, the suffering, but it's just not there anymore. And I'm finding, even when I like work that's shown, I don't get a choice truly. Like, I think what you have hanging there, I think that's what work that I liked from a book that I had done, but it's for me, it's always what's current. It's always what's current, never what I would choose. It's like, this is current, this is something. But for myself, one of these days I'm going to be a sci-fi writer. So I'm halfway to where I want to be, hopefully.
Awesome. I hope you get there. We have a request in the chat. If you could say the name of your website so that people can find you.
Here, I'll type in www.ariotstorm, ARIOTSTORM.com.
Area storm.
Yeah.
Does anybody else? Emil, Trinidad, do you have anything to add on this topic?
Oh,
Otherwise, I'm gonna.
I think I just would like to quickly know if there are other curators. I think there are a couple of curators in the audience that I know about, or people that work within museums. I would just like to say that there needs to be a more deliberate movement to get people of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color cartoonists in museums, because although a lot of folks in my communities who are from marginalized communities show locally, they show in community centers and nonprofits at universities. Very rarely do they show ever in museums. And the few folks I know who are curators find it very difficult to get Black, Indigenous, and people of color work inside museums. So if anyone's listening, please just be deliberate about researching and finding these folks, because they're everywhere.
I tried to get, all kinds of voices.
Oh, you really did.
I'm really so glad to have all of you. I've got a question here. I think younger people have generally accepted comics as a form of literature, very different from my generation, who thought that it was juvenile. That shift has contributed to the market for a broader range of stories and styles. And I know, like all of you, your topics are so different. Maybe Emil, I see your book under the arms of lots of people walking around in San Francisco. I think the library must be out of it all the time. Yeah, there it is. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that you're really kind of a breakthrough book for a lot of people.
I am going to confess to you that I was just looking at the name Ariot Storm, and I was thinking, I wrote that wrong. And so I missed the first part of your question. I'm being completely honest about what a dunce I just was. So I heard the second part, but I didn't hear the first part. So what, I'm not.
Oh, well, the person was just commenting that, comics are a lot more accepted as literature, and that young people now just kind of accept graphic novels as like another genre of writing, and don't really think of it as like juvenile comic books anymore. And I just think that your book has had such a huge outreach that I kind of just wanted to know what you thought about that.
It's been kind of astonishing, and I hope that this is the direction that we're all going to be moving in with our work in this way. And that is that a lot of people who don't generally read comic books have reached out to me and said, you were my first. So this is, I popped a lot of cherries out there, and that's a terrible thing. I shouldn't have said that, and I know I should not have said that, but I did. And I mean, a lot of comic book, a lot of people who never touched a graphic novel or a comic book, and they thought it was like so below them. And I'm just really happy that they decided to maybe give it a try. And then they're kind of, sometimes people contact me and they say, what do I do now? Like they're really excited. And about you, all of you. And I say, oh, there's just so many people. It's now that you've discovered that this is something you enjoy. So yeah, that's really exciting, I think. And I'm very honored and extremely shocked, frankly, to be part of that. And I think a lot of people are part of that. I don't think it's just me, you know what I mean? It's a lot of people are just realizing, I watch television, I enjoy the visual, and then I turn to a textual book, and well, lo and behold, look at this over here. That's this magic combination of both. and how delightful that is.
Yeah. But I was thinking too, Ebony, we were talking earlier that the people like randomly come up to you and tell you stories about their hair. And you were saying that you felt a real kinship with them over that. Could you talk about that a little bit?
It's been, I mean, I miss that because, you know, we've been, you know, off the road because of everything that's going on. But, you know, I didn't make Hot Comb with I didn't make the stories in Hot Comb with the intention of actually making it into a book called Hot Comb. I was just making it for myself. And I had like maybe 5 people look it over, like folks I had been making comics with. And all of them, I was doing this when I was at the University of Wisconsin in Madison getting my PhD. So they were all like other folks like me who weren't like actually like artists, but like in different fields like sociology or communications and environmental science and stuff. And we just also happened to draw comics. And so I was terrified. I was very happy and over the moon and that someone wanted to like publish my work. But then it dawned on me that it would be so more people could read it. And so I was wondering and probably a little anxious over the reception I would get. And so it's been really nice to have people come up to me and like say that they've resonated with some aspects of my stories. And sometimes it's directed about like hair and Black women's hair, and then other times it's about like other aspects of the stories. Like this, I remember this one guy loved how I used music in my stories and how, you know, and then we started talking about how music was really important to us like growing up, and nostalgia for like the record player. And then, you know, more heartbreaking things. This person came up to me and talked to me about his family's struggle with drug abuse, and how the story Big Ma was really important to him. And that was really just nice to have. And I miss that with the whole COVID thing.
Yeah. I'm looking if there's any other questions here. Does anybody else have a comment about the widespread of graphic novels?
I'm sure Lee and I are from, you know, a time when comic books were generally considered trash. I mean, I would have teachers walk up and if they saw you with one, they would take it out of your hand, they'd throw it in the trash. And I was like, hey, thanks for destroying my personal property. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty nasty when we were growing up, the attitudes toward comics. So seeing things change so much is almost disorienting. You know, one of the things I was thinking of the other day is I did the art for Stanley's autobiography. And one of the incidents in that autobiography was how he would go out of his way not to tell people what he did for a living. He would say he was a writer, but he wouldn't say he was a comic book writer because it was embarrassing. You know, that generation, you know, comic books were trash. They poisoned your brain and they were junk. So people didn't go out of their way to let others know what you were doing for a living. And I used to get so much crap, including from the science fiction and fantasy communities. You know, when I started going to conventions, I started science fiction and fantasy fandom, and they wouldn't let comics or comic art in those shows. You weren't allowed to be in the shows.
What?
So everything's flipped. It's weird. Yeah, it's really.
Yeah, I remember hearing from a lot of the comic strip artists and comic book artists that they were traveling under assumed names. They would tell some of their relatives actually that they were just a writer and they wouldn't say what they wrote, or they would make up things that they said they wrote. And for the artists, they would never use the term cartoonist because that alone was a key word. They would say they were an artist, and they would, because at this time, everybody lived in New York. People would assume that they were artists for advertisements, and they never disabused anybody of this misapprehension.
No one was encouraged to become a cartoonist when I was growing up.
No,
Nobody.
not at all.
You were encouraged to go into advertising, but you were never encouraged to be a cartoonist. People would try to talk you out of it. And if you worked in comics, you would get a lot of crap. So it is honestly, to this day, I haven't quite internalized this new scene where I'm told online sometimes how super privileged I am, because my brain is still back in this time when I got started, when this was a disreputable job. This was something you did because you weren't a real artist and you were poisoning the brains of the children of America. That is the generation that we come from.
Yay!
You know, yay, go us. So now it's, oh, you got the coolest job and you're so privileged and yada yada. And I'm sitting there going like, really? Okay.
Well, and so many people that were interested in cartooning that went to actual law school were discouraged.
Yep.
Or law school, you know, art school, you know, if you weren't
They didn't teach it when I was a kid. They did not teach it. They didn't.
Yeah.
I think the Kubert school was just starting, and it was a technical school, and you couldn't even transfer your credits, so nobody went unless you were kind of an idiot. And I don't mean to denigrate the Kubert school, but you couldn't transfer your credits. I mean, it was like going to, you know, plumbing school.
Well,
so,
and it took years for them to get accredited.
Yeah.
When I began at art school, and I began older, I was 40 when I went back to school, there were no comics classes. I had to go to animation. There was nothing for comics at all. And in the amount of time that I was there, in the 7 years, because I got my BFA and my MFA back to back, as old as I was, in that 7 years, there came comics classes. I mean, it happened in the early 2000s. It's so recent. I mean, when I was putting my first 24 pages together for the book, one of my teachers saw it, and I won't mention her name because I'm trying to be kind to her, but she said, "You're a dilettante, you know, and what do you want, this little comic book of yours?" And she was very diminishing, because she was in the literature department, and that was, you know, up close next to God. And I was down with a greasy devil eating off of his crotch or something, you know. It's just like I was the most disgusting creature. And I mean, you know, I don't know what to say to that, but I mean, I'd had enough of that growing up, you know, that I knew comics were very dangerous. And I don't know if you will agree with this, but what I kind of became aware of was two things. For one thing, straight up literature folks are scared to death of us, because it's our shit's magic. It's just magic. If you can do both sides of the brain, if you can get the textual, you know, what reads text and what reads visual working together, that's a magic spell. The Egyptians understood that, you know? So I think they're just scared. And I kind of don't want them to be scared, but there's a part of me that's kind of okay.
Well, even in comic studies, as comics have moved into a more, you know, as the academic side of comics has started to develop, since most of the teachers are actually hired as English people, as English teachers, and comics is like kind of their sideline. Most of the time, they're not really plugged into the artwork. They don't really know how to analyze it. So as an art historian and comic studies, I've been making a real effort to write more about like art and form and, you know, layout and what makes it work, because, you know, the academics just don't know how to talk about it.
I'm finding that there's
I found a lot of people
that come together.
Go ahead. Go
So
ahead.
that comic book artists have a voice. Without that voice, that ability to, you know, express, to say, to focus and explain our art, we're missing out on half of that battle right there. To have no voice lends to people coming up saying, so what's this story about? Or what's this piece about? And you're going, just buy the art, leave me alone. So in my teaching at SVA, I'm finding in my classes, I am now emphasizing more of that storytelling, teaching my students how to use their voice, which I was listening to everybody here, and I'm realizing we're all repeating the same stories in different eras. For myself coming in here, I came to New York with a dream, a duffel bag and a guitar, like, you know, like the rock songs. And this is what I was going to do. Even my pen name, Ariat Store, my website name, that comes from having to hide my artwork or it would be torn down. Girls didn't draw this. Girls who look like me definitely didn't draw this. We only had one future. And that was, you know, to end up on welfare with children. You weren't even given an opportunity. So I had to hide. And moving to New York, I said, this is where you come to learn art. This is the Mecca. This is the center. Go to SVA. And it was so male centric that I'm the only girl in all of the cartooning department.
Wow.
Getting mansplained to why no comic book company would hire me. And I'm going, and it was such a toxic environment that I lasted 2 semesters and that was it. I could not go there anymore. So I'm a self-taught artist, having to learn this craft by myself, and literally going to a convention, walking up to Joe Quesada, look at my portfolio, and it took off from there. Coming 21 years later, I'm a teacher at SVA. My class is 90% women. I watched the whole thing shift and change. I watched the strength come. And while I'm seeing all of this togetherness and all of this things happening, it also frightens me a lot because I'm also starting to see a new type of segregation within comics. Whereas this year, I'm having people ask me, so how did it feel drawing Wolverine? You know, he's such a strong male character. It's like, I've drawn Wolverine quite a few times throughout these years. He's not new to me, but they have this thought that you're beginning to become, I don't want to use the word pigeonhole, but women are drawing women books. Black people are drawing Black books. And we're slowly starting to segregate, whereas we need to draw everything. You don't have the luxury because you never know what you're going to be asked to draw next. I was asked to draw dragons once, and I'd never drawn a dragon before in comics. Like, well, that's new. So we have to keep fighting because we have to be careful. And we're always looking to segregate and separate, and we can't do that.
She's absolutely right. I was really pigeonholed a lot early on, and when they offered me Barbie, I said no to Barbie. I said I'll do Clive Barker's Hellraiser, because I said if I get Barbie, I'm going to be doing Barbie for the next decade. I need to not take that job. I need to take this job over here. I feel more comfortable doing jobs that are more decorative and prettier and girly, for lack of a better terms, because I actually like them. But as a choice, I know that if I take certain jobs, that's all I'm going to get for years. I have to go against the obvious, or I have to take the job. And this is a real advantage. I'm really lucky to be in this position where I've got a really powerful writer. I'm working with very powerful writers and working with Neil Gaiman. You take a job with Neil Gaiman, you can do okay. So that's a real privilege. But when I'm taking mainstream jobs, I'm really careful of what I accept, because that may be all I get for a long time to come.
That's the scary part. They were only as good as the last book we're on. And I did draw Barbie, and that little wench was the hardest thing I've ever drawn because she's on model. Ooh, Barbie.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Barbie.
I did Disney's Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah. Okay, well, I could talk to you guys like, I wish we could go out for drinks and go on forever, but it's been an hour and a half and we need to wrap up. So thank you, Colleen, Lee, Ebony, Emil, and Alitha. I'm so sorry.
Yay.
I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And Trinidad, wherever she vanished off to. And thank you very much to the society. And it's a great show. If you
Thank you.
haven't seen it yet, please do.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Society.
Thank you
Thank
for having
you.
me.
Bye.
Bye.